All right, I guess that's how we're starting. First question this week comes in from Graham from Vancouver. Got a Canadian on our hands.
Wow.
Graham says, "Hi all, I've been incorporating box step-ups into my gym routine. However, I'm finding it difficult with my little cyclist arms to hold on to dumbbells big enough to get a good workout on my legs. Any thoughts or suggestions on a better way to add weight to the box step-ups, or perhaps another way of making them harder, or any other exercises for that? Right now I can do 15 to 20 reps with 45-pound dumbbells, but I can't hold on to anything heavier. Thanks a million, Graham."
I have the same issue.
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that one. Wow.
You weren't?
No.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two exercises where I struggle with this, and it's deadlifts. I do trap bar deadlifts.
Okay.
And then I guess box step-ups.
You mean struggle with grip strength?
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I mean, on both of them, I struggle with grip strength, but with the trap bar deadlifts in particular, because when I progress to my full strength, I'm doing like over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
And my legs can handle 300 pounds, but like,
can they?
They can, dude. Surprisingly, my skinny little legs can handle 300 pounds, but it is so hard to grip through. I need chalk.
Yeah, I need
chalk.
Use chalk a
Yeah.
few times. That does make.
That's.
A big
I mean, yeah,
difference.
that's fair. But do you feel like you're like what do you feel like? Do you feel like you're just going to release the weight? Like what gives out?
Your
Your
forearms.
Your forearms, yeah.
Your forearm muscles are what give you grip strength, and feels like your forearms are going to give out.
Okay. I mean, I haven't had this problem, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, because you're just so ripped in the upper body.
Yeah. No, I've never felt like it was my grip strength holding me back from any of those types of exercises.
You climb some, don't you? I feel like if you do any bit of like climbing, your forearm strength is just so much higher than average.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've just got pretty good grip strength in general. Like even before I climbed, like back in high school and things like that, it would, whenever I was doing powerlifting exercises, it never seemed like it was my grip strength that was the limiting factor. But I mean, you can also do. So what I was going to say is like you can do grip strength exercises, which would be maybe a place to start, because I think grip strength is actually really important. So I don't think you should just like continue to progress for Graham here. I don't think Graham should just continue to progress with alternative loading options by just completely negating the opportunity to increase grip strength.
Did you know grip strength is like people who do big studies on general health use grip strength, and grip strength is highly correlated to like just general strength. So like instead of like making people do deadlifts and squats, they'll just make them like test their grip strength, and that's like a pretty accurate way to measure somebody's overall strength, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
it seems so like way too simple.
But a lot of those studies are also doing it by measuring grip strength by holding strengths, or like holding exercises. So basically testing how long you can do a body weight hold.
Oh.
So it's testing grip strength, but also like some muscular endurance as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Grip strength, by the way, it's not just correlated with regular strength. Grip strength is correlated with things that you would not think it would be correlated with.
Like
heart
disease?
I've not personally done the research on this, but I've listened to a podcast where the podcaster was talking about grip strength and what it's correlated with.
IQ.
One thing, what?
IQ.
Not IQ. I think it's correlated more with things that have to do with testosterone level.
Sure,
So here's a correlation that I thought was funny. And I don't know if this is like appropriate for this podcast. You can decide whether you want to cut this out or not. But grip strength was correlated with the number of sexual partners a man has. Higher grip strength, higher number of sexual partners.
Okay.
What a weird. How did they?
But but
or it could have just been that the people with the higher grip strength were more prone to lie about how many partners they
sure, but like
the gym bros lying about how, oh yeah,
remember that
got so many.
correlation doesn't equal causation, right? But
Yeah.
I think that, you know, if you wanted to hypothesize about why that might be, I think the underlying factor that's affecting both of those would be testosterone levels.
Yeah, sure.
Makes sense. So what was
Yeah.
this guy's question again?
Yeah, so going back to Graham's question, Graham wants to know, you know, he was specifically asking for different ways that he could
Yeah.
increase the loading to continue to progress his step up or box step up routine.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Increasing
it seems like this
yeah.
is like the one exercise that he's running into issues, particularly pertaining to grip strength.
Yeah, I mean, you could work on improving your grip strength, but that's like a long-term fix. I think an immediate fix would be to just do a different workout. And the first one that comes to mind that I would think that replicates a step up as close as possible, that you could also, but instead of using dumbbells, you could use a barbell with weight on your back so that it eliminates the grip strength, would be like reverse lunges. Reverse lunges are almost the exact same movement as a step up.
Yeah.
You're just doing it with a dumbbell, so you can or you're doing it with a barbell, so you can put more weight on your back than on your arms.
So this is what I'll say too, is there's a reason why squats is, I guess squats and deadlifts. Deadlifts, you have this problem too with the grip strength thing, but there's a reason why squat is like the main movement that you do when you go into the gym. You know, you do your heavy sets with that. And then I see stuff like box steps as kind of secondary stuff that you do after you've done your main lifts. Your main lifts being squats and deadlifts.
Yep.
And usually like those secondary lifts don't need to be crazy heavy.
Yeah, that's true.
To be honest, what I personally did this year was I kind of just cut out accessory lifts. So I didn't do lunges or box steps or any of that. I just did squats and deadlifts and then got out of there.
Wow.
Like I kept it to the bare basics, like hit, you know, I still hit the number of sets and reps per week to elicit, you know, elicit the kind of response that I wanted. But I just cut out accessory lifts. I just kept it to the main sets and then got out of there because I was like, I don't want to induce unnecessary fatigue, which this isn't really this guy's question, but yeah, I didn't do box steps this year and I didn't do lunges. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that people do that. I was just kind of taking this like no nonsense approach to the gym where I'm like, I am doing what increases my watts and I'm not doing one thing more.
Yeah, I like yeah, I do similar, but I do like a second set of secondary movements, mainly because I think it's important to do single leg to isolate the legs. Why? I don't know. I can't give you like a super scientific reason, but to me, it seems like something important to have in strength training is when you're isolating one leg at a time. I just think that's valuable.
Sure.
And
so you talked about like doing, you know, lunges in that regard. You could also do like
I do a
rear leg
set,
elevated.
Yeah.
Lunges,
Bulgarian split squats. Where you put the back leg up. Those are really good. All of those are basically the same movement as a deadlift or a squat. You're just doing it with one leg at a time.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about lifting is like, I don't know, you know, you could talk to 10 different coaches about what their lifting protocol looks like, and you probably get 10 different answers, and they'll all have justifications for why they did this and why they did that. And I think, you know, I don't know if there's a need to get so nitpicky about these things, because I think I'm just going to assume that this person's ultimate goal is a race result of some sort, or maybe just to get fitter. I don't know. But at least speaking for myself and a lot of the listeners, they've got some race result in mind. You know, is your is your race result in July gonna be thrown off because instead of lunges you did box steps all the way back in January? Like these really fine nitpicky arguments about what to do and not do in the gym, I kind of feel like if you're just generally doing what you're supposed to in the gym, all of these nitpicky arguments about what to do and not do in the gym is like, it's a little bit too in the weeds. It's like losing the forest for the trees. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, especially if you're just focused on cycling performance. Or maybe you're not even focused on cycling performance, but you're just worried about, or you're just focused on prioritizing longevity or general health, right? It does not need to be complicated. Very similar to programming your cycling training. It does not need to be complicated. It just needs to be varied and progressive so that your body can keep making adaptations. But even in the gym, though, at some point, you're going to reach a point where you don't need to get stronger in order to maintain healthy, lifestyle and overall well-being, as well as maintaining cycling performance. At some point, there's very quickly diminishing returns, and you're probably you 6 months in the gym, and you're probably hitting that point.
Yeah. I don't know. So sometimes I get questions about like, what do you think of this workout? What do you think of this gym exercise? What do you think of that gym exercise? And I'm like, I mean, is it targeting quads? Okay, good. Is it, are you able to get close, somewhat close to maximum within 10 sets? Okay, good. Like I think that's a good exercise to do. And it doesn't necessarily need to be much more of a debate than that, I think. And the reason why I harp on squats and deadlifts so much is just because those are the two easiest exercises to do exactly what I just said. Target quads and max out within. And when I say max out, I don't think you should actually max out as a cyclist, but get close to maximum within 10 sets. It's very easy to do that with squats and deadlifts, which is just why it's such an easy go-to.
Yeah, I always find myself from like having to remind myself that one of the big studies that I remember reading about strength training was, it has like, it listed off all of the all of the big gains that you get from strength training, like direct to cycling performance. I think the big one was like a 17% increase in time to exhaustion, and I think it was like a 40K time trial or something was what they were testing, but really big gains. And the protocol was so small. It was like, I think they were doing 2 to 3 sessions a week. The strength training group was doing 2 to 3 sessions a week, and it was a 4x5 squat, and it was, so they're literally just doing 20 squats, nothing else. 20 squats 2 to 3 times a week. I'm like, you could do that, and this one session could take maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and you do that 2 times a week. Like that's that seems like, so like anytime when I'm like, man, I don't have time to do the gym, I'm like, even if I just get in and do 20 squats, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's something we talk a lot about with cycling programming, but the same applies to your strength training program. Whatever routine you can come up with that is going to be sustainable and just, easy for you to be consistent with, that's going to be the best routine for you. So if you only have access to certain equipment at home, but it's way more convenient for you to go to your home gym 3 or 4 times a week than it is for you to drive to the gym.
Right.
And a lot of times too, because you have that investment of driving to the gym, you feel like you need to stay there for an hour, because it's like 10 or 15 minute drive, and then all the prep work, and then you get there and maybe you're waiting around for equipment, or you want to do your warm up, like before you know it, it's like a 2-hour time investment. And it's like, that's just not sustainable, nor is it going to be long-term benefiting your overall cycling performance, because that time could have been better spent doing other aerobic activity. So it's like, if you can formulate a routine that you can do in 10 to 20 minutes 3 times a week at home with whatever equipment you have available, which the barrier to entry to the equipment that you would need is pretty minimal, probably less than your annual gym membership. that's going to be better for you long term because it's something that you can do consistently.
Yeah. I do longer gym sessions, I think, in the winter, but that's probably because I'm just not riding as much. So like
Yeah.
a 1 hour gym session in the middle of the winter is a little bit easier to do, but in the summer when I'm riding a ton and it's nice out, like I don't want to spend an hour in the gym. I want to be outside riding. So
For
my
sure.
gym workouts shorten a lot in the summer.
Yeah. So one thing I was going to mention, and this might be a good piece of equipment to get in general for people, but especially for Graham here. So like going back to Graham's question, if Graham wants to continue to progress box step ups, particularly like maybe this is an accessory lift that he's doing in his either home gym or at the gym, adding a weight vest is like pretty easy and minimal cost and something that you can modulate. So you can get a weight vest and get a set of weights that'll progress you up to 40-50 pounds, and depending on the exercise, like that might be good too, especially if you're talking about like more overall health and well-being and longevity purposes, just because you're getting a little bit more loading without loading your hands and forearms and such.
And then Graham could go do some rucking.
Yeah.
Go be a rucker if you want.
Don't do rucking. Don't do rucking.
But yeah, I mean, so like that's one option for Graham if Graham's just looking for equipment to purchase or throw on time. Maybe your gym's probably got some weight vests, but that could be an option. But yeah, I would say doing things like farmers lifts, like that could be a really good option for improving grip strength too. Like if you can hold 45 pounds, you could do some farmers lifts or farmers walks, whatever you want to call it, which is basically you're just walking back and forth 20-30 steps holding those 45-pound weights. But I especially if Graham's an off-road racer, I think having good grip strength is important.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the grip strength is more important if you're a mountain biker.
Yeah.
So, you can decide whether or not you actually want to go the route of improving your grip strength or just adjusting your workout so that that's not an issue for you.
All right. Let's move on here. So this one I think is a pretty timely question. This one comes in from David. David says, "Hey Matchbox crew, can you guys discuss your recovery approach after gravel events? I've been doing 100-ish mile gravel races for a long time, and they do take a lot out of me. Often I'll take the following day off and do shorter, easy rides for a few days, and then slowly do a little bit more each day until I feel kind of normal. That can take a week or 10 days sometimes. I'd be interested how Dylan approaches recovery from long events, and if you guys have any specific protocols that you'd recommend." So timely in that, this episode's going to come out shortly after Unbound just wrapped up. So there might be some people out there that are particularly looking for some recovery approaches here.
Sure.
Drew, you can answer this one too if you'd like.
Oh, I'm allowed to? Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that after a long gravel race, I'm kind of it's a good time to listen to your body and not necessarily have a set plan in place, because I think that it's funny that I'm saying this as a coach, but sometimes you actually do need to just play it by ear and listen to your body before you get into normal training. Because let's say you do a long gravel race and then you have this idea that after 1 week I get back to normal training. Like I recover for a week, and then when I hit the 1 week mark, I'm back to normal training. If you feel like crap at the 1 week mark, then don't do that. Like, give yourself some more time. And that's when it's hard for me to give a standard protocol here because every race is different. And every, depending on the demands of the race, it might take longer or shorter to recover from. But as far as what it might look like after its 7 or 8 hour gravel race, I'm probably doing nothing the following day, and then probably for about 3 days after that, it's just an hour to an hour and a half recovery ride. And then now we're 4 days out ish, And I think that's the point at which I really start to listen to my body when I get on the bike and say, am I recovered? Can I do normal training? Or am I still in a hole and I gotta just do a recovery ride today? And I'll listen to my body and I'll let my body guide me until I get back to a point where I can do normal training, and then I can actually plan out the week properly.
Mm-hmm. How much are you looking at or considering your post-race recovery when you're planning your preparation going into the event?
Almost not at all.
Okay.
Almost zero.
Yeah. Because I think the reason I ask is I think a lot of people, and they'll even do this with A races sometimes, which blows my mind. But a lot of people will start thinking too far ahead about what's going to come after the race and getting worried about, like, I got to maintain CTL at a certain level. I've got to, make sure that I can get back to training and not lose too much fitness, before and, after the race. Instead of just focusing on like what is most important for me to have the best performance I can at this race. Now, if it's a C race, that doesn't matter. But, particularly we're talking about A races here, and maybe B races, but A races in particular, like, I think a lot of people get too focused on what's to come later, like the future, versus like, you're prepping for this race specifically. So you should be doing everything that you possibly can to make sure that this race goes well. And then after the race, like you're talking about, just kind of more, intuition based return to training.
Yeah. I don't, if I'm going into Unbound, I'm not thinking one bit about the next day.
Yeah.
Sunday, the day after
or even the next week, probably, right?
I'm really not thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's too many other things to think about.
Yeah.
I'm like looking forward to not having to ride my bike next week.
I mean, I guess, but like when I'm going into an A race, like I get into this mindset where anything that happens after the race, I'll deal with that later. Like, I am not thinking about one single thing that happens after the race. I am thinking about everything that needs to happen before the race, and that's it.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe that's just like a difference in personality or something, but like I'm really not thinking about the following week.
I just think I think that's the right approach. And I think that's how you go all in for A races, is by throwing everything you can in preparation to have the best day you can on that A race, and then take the post race days in stride and just use your intuition, or if you're working with a coach, like, you and your coach working together to plan your return to training afterwards. But I agree. And I'll even do this, I with my athletes a lot of times, where in Training Peaks, I'll kind of build out what the recovery week, or two after a race looks like, but then I'll hide all of those workouts. So like after the race, like on Training Peaks, an athlete literally sees nothing. And it's like, that's what I want you to focus on. I don't want you to be thinking at all about what we're going to be doing after the race.
Yeah. One thing that we kind of have given Dylan a hard time about in the past is like, he'll skip races. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like a reason that you skip some of these races that happen before your A race. So for example, BWR California, it's a good race, hard race. I know you particularly don't like that race, but like you won't go to a race like that because you realize going to that race is going to be a couple days where you're missing training, like missing good training before the event. And obviously the event is good training, but then you're missing you're missing maybe up to a week after the event, recovering from it. And so you're so focused on your A event, which in this case would be Unbound, that you will forgo some races in order to get in more training. And it kind of goes back to this question, because like you are considering the recovery from that other B race.
Yeah.
In the decision to forego, you're saying sure.
Like we give him a hard time for skipping so many races, but the reason he skips races is because he is so focused on his A race.
Yeah.
He'd rather be more prepared for his A race than to forfeit some training that he could do going to a B race.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you can be both over raced and under raced, just like you can be overtrained and undertrained. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that it's necessarily, it depends on the person, but I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to have 0 race days leading into your A race.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think it's a good idea to have 25 race days leading into your, and I'm just throwing out a random number here. Maybe 25 is the right amount for you, but like, you can do too many races leading into a race. And if you're well trained, races aren't, you'd think, some people talk about racing into shape, but if you're really well trained and you train a lot per week, a lot of times these gravel races, they're not really opportunities to gain fitness. If anything, you might be losing fitness because you're tapering beforehand and then you're recovering afterwards. But you still want to have those race days so that you have race efforts in your legs, like very race specific efforts in your legs. And then you also just have a dress rehearsal for what race day is going to look like.
Right. Drew, anything else that you would specifically would want to add? I mean, you've transitioned from shorter racing like criteriums and cyclocross in recent years to more of these one-day gravel races. Anything that you've drastically changed or specifically changed in your recovery protocol?
Yeah, I mean, a gravel race is like way more TSS than a cross race. So with that increase, yeah, you definitely have to be more aware of recovery. So my protocol is a day off and then an easy spin. And then on the third day, I usually just progress. So like I'll do day off, easy spin, a 1 to 2 hour endurance ride. And then maybe I would do intervals the next day or like do a 2 to 3 hour endurance ride. But like each ride's getting a little bit longer until I feel like pretty much back to normal. And then whenever I do decide to do my first workout after the race, I'll treat my first set of that workout as like a test. So like if I start the intervals and I can tell like, oh snap, this isn't good, then I'll shut it down and I'll say, well, I'm not recovered from the race, so I'll put it off to the next day and just do another pretty chill endurance ride or something that day. But I think it's like there are days when I'll do an easy spin and I feel like garbage, but then, and maybe I'll feel that way for the first 30 minutes or an hour of a day that I'm going to do intervals. But then once I start doing intervals, I actually feel pretty good. So I think like starting that first interval of your workout as like a test, to me, that's when I'll figure out like, oh, I'm recovered or I'm not recovered, is when I actually do like a little bit of intensity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I'll add here too. So David mentions that, it feels like it takes him 7 to 10 days to return to feeling normal. I think it's all relative. And if that's what it takes David, then that's what it takes David, and I don't think David should be jumping back to training too soon, because that can lead to disaster down the road. But generally the fitter you are, more prepared you are for that specific event, the better your recovery is going to go on the back end.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
So if it's taken David 7 to 10 days, that's probably just relative to what his fitness is coming in compared to how heavy the loading is during that race. So an athlete that trains 6 to 10 hours a week is not going to recover as fast as an athlete that trains 16 to 20 hours a week. It's just
And if a race, just thinking about like, I guess TSS, like if a race is 300 TSS and you do a lot of like 200, 250 TSS days, and 300, like you're pretty adapted to that. But if you never get close to 300 and then you hit a 300 TSS day on race day, it's like, oh snap, like that's way more than your body's used to. And so yeah, it's naturally just going to take longer to recover.
Right. What about anything like nutrition wise that you'll like intentionally include as part of your recovery?
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity to get on one of my high horses that no one else in cycling gets on, and it really peeves me. People should be talking about this more.
Protein shakes?
No, dude. People talk about protein all the time.
Joking.
No, it's antioxidants. You guys for sure have heard me talk about antioxidants, but
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why more people don't talk about antioxidants, and you know, the literature is interesting because if you do supplemental antioxidants, it may be one of those cases just like doing an ice bath where it's, you know, it's reducing the inflammation and speeding recovery, but it's hindering adaptation. Interestingly, though, antioxidants from real food seems to have it's the best of both worlds. It is speeding recovery while not hindering adaptation, which is exactly what you want. And that's why I generally try to have a very high antioxidant diet in general, just at all times. But particularly after a big race, like I'm very mindful of eating very high antioxidant foods. And just as an example, like high antioxidant foods are just generally healthy foods like fruits and vegetables. Like as a category of food, fruits and vegetables are the highest in antioxidants.
Yeah, which can be overlooked a lot, I think. So that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I feel like, especially at gravel races, you know, a lot of the times you finish a gravel race and what's at the expo,
Barbecue.
yeah, there's going to be a lot of very inflammatory foods. You're talking, yeah, you know, foods with high dairy content and gluten content. You're going to have like opportunity to go to like the beer garden and you know, have a, you know, your cash in on your beer coupon or whatever. A lot of things that are going to contribute to actually increasing inflammation versus what Dylan's talking about here, which is like you're intentionally trying to decrease inflammation to speed up recovery. And I do remember I think you've talked about the whole food or natural food source for antioxidants versus supplementing and the contradicting effects that they can have. And I think that's super important and relevant to bring up. You know, a lot of people don't have just a cooler of berries and salad in their car, right? Like a lot of times it's like, you know, they're just going to grab for whatever closest thing they have after the race, which might be a hot dog or a slice of pizza or something like that.
No.
Which,
Hot dogs are for during the race, Adam.
that's true.
Yeah, come
on. You know, so Drew, I mean, you brought up protein shakes, but that could be a great opportunity, you know.
Yeah, if you put a bunch of frozen fruit in a protein shake.
Put a bunch of frozen fruit and some protein into your, you know, into a whatever, one of those, you know, protein shake cups or whatever.
Yeah.
Put that in your cooler, and that could be like a really good post-race option.
Yeah. You're getting protein, carbs, and antioxidants with that.
And it's one of those things where, you know, it's going to be hard to measure or anecdotally feel in the moment, but it may be something that if you track it over time, instead of it taking 10 days to recover and return to normal, maybe it's only 4 days, right? Like it's something that's, it's not like this magic pill that you're going to take and be able to like start training the next day, but you might just be able to track trends over time that you start to feel back to normal quicker. Almost guaranteed you probably do.
Yeah.
What about, I mean, are you guys into recovery equipment? You know, like the elevated legs or Normatec type, you know, boot compression leg things, or any other like massage gun or anything like that?
I've used them off and on in the past. I mean, massage, you know, there's research to show that massage helps with recovery. I don't know if there's research specifically on like these compression boots. At least the last time I did a video on it, I don't recall there was, but you know, I don't know. I think that with all of that, this is like how I rank recovery modalities, and I think some people might rank it a different way. Like they see these like these recovery products as very important. Like getting in the boots is very important. I put good nutrition and sleep is like the top priority, and then everything else is well underneath that in terms of importance. That's not to say that it doesn't do anything. It probably does do something, but it's not even close to getting a lot of sleep and having good nutrition.
Yeah. I like that you put sleep in there because, yeah, I think that's super important.
Yeah.
And that can be challenging too. And there may be some things that you have to implement into your post-race nighttime routine, because a lot of times after these like really hard races, your muscles are sore, your body's tired. And even though like you're tired and fatigued and you feel like you could go to sleep, a lot of times the sleep is not high quality. So there may be some things that you need to do to try and improve your sleep quality even in the following days.
Yeah. Yeah. Your sleep after a really hard ultra endurance race is very compromised, which is counterintuitive for some people, but yep, it will be, unfortunately.
All right, let's do one more here. This is from Scott. Scott says, is it possible to have an LT1 that is too close to an LT2, meaning you go from being comfortable to unsustainable without much increase in power? If so, what's your advice for spreading these out? I thought this was interesting because I feel like a lot of times we're trying to train those two to actually be pretty close.
Yeah, generally as riders get more fit, those two get closer. So less fit riders will usually have a bigger gap, and fitter riders will have a smaller gap between those two. And generally that is seen as a good thing to have a smaller gap.
But if your LT2 is so low,
yeah,
that's all. I'm not trying to insult the guy. I'm just thinking it sounds like your LT2 in that scenario would be the limiter, and you need to increase your LT2 to.
But here's the thing: is like it's all relative. Like I mean, everybody's LT2 could be higher. Everybody's LT1 could be higher. True. There's no limit. It's not like there's not a perfect LT1 or LT2. It's just higher is better, right? Higher is always better. So, if your LT2 is 200 watts, well, that's good enough for you to compete in this category. If your LT2 is 400 watts, that's good enough for you to compete in this category. And I would say that generally, regardless of what category you're competing in, it is actually better to have your LT1 closer to that LT2.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we just, talk about in terms of numbers, let's say, I would say for most people that are relatively trained, not even highly trained, but relatively trained, your LT1's probably going to be somewhere around 75 to 78% of your FTP. The more trained you get, the closer you're going to be pushing into maybe even in the mid 80s, 80% of 85% of FTP. So if you just look at what those two markers mean, under LT1, your lactate is really not increasing a whole lot. It's staying very stable. And that type of stable lactate level is going to be sustainable for a lot longer. Yep. So if you're able to achieve that and your LT1 is at, let's say, 85%, then that means you can do 84% of your FTP without really having a whole lot of hindrance on at least lactate pooling. You're obviously still going to be fatiguing your body and eventually run out of energy. But in terms of the effects that lactate accumulation is going to have, it's going to be minimal versus someone who's can only ride at 74%. You're talking 10% more relative to FTP that you can sustain without starting to accumulate. In between LT1 and LT2, it's like you're able to a lot of times buffer it at close to the same rate. So LT or lactate levels are going to be somewhat stable, but they're going to be elevated, and it's and they're going to slowly increase over time. Above LT2, those lactate levels are increasing at a rate that your body cannot keep up with.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, on paper, it makes sense that the closer those two markers are, knowing that LT2 is just your percentage of is your FTP. So that's 100% of FTP roughly. So the higher percentage of that you can sustain before you start accumulating increasing levels of lactate, the more sustainable that effort's going to be.
So if we want to do this with actual numbers right now,
Mhm.
let's say LT2 is 300 watts, LT1 is 225. I mean, I think when you actually do it with numbers, you can visualize how I don't want to say how obvious, but it is kind of obvious the right answer here. So, is it better or worse for your LT1 to be 200 or 225? If your LT2 is 300, and that's not going to change, it's going to be 300. Is it under any race scenario, like, any race scenario that you could possibly think of, is it better or worse for your LT1 to be 200 or 225? And I think the answer is obvious. You want it to be 225.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that math check out for you, Dizzle?
Yeah, you really simplified it for me there. I was like, I've been sitting here thinking through all this, and I don't know. I was gonna overcomplicate it, and Dylan just simplified it.
Yeah, which I think was good. So
yeah.
My question for Scott would be, does Scott really know what LT1 means? Because what I wonder is, like, maybe Scott is conflating LT1 with tempo, like just being able to ride at tempo. So maybe Scott is, without realizing it, he's riding well above LT1 before he starts to get uncomfortable. And then he kind of goes from what he feels like sustainable to uncomfortable is like that when he starts pushing over LT2.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, unless you've went and got your lactate tested, you're just guessing what your LT1 and LT2 is.
Yeah, you kind of are.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I was curious about was like, I feel like you have to consider your LT2 potential in the equation. Because, like, if you're already at or pretty darn close, maxed out to your LT2 potential, this is the highest LT2 I could have, then yeah, like a higher LT1 would be obviously what you would, I don't know, not focus on, but like that would be a good thing to increase.
Highly desirable.
But if you have a ton of room for growth for your LT2, then focus on that, and then that gap.
Well, I'd say focus on both.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you're naturally
solely on that, but focus on both.
You're going to be naturally focusing on, like, all training is going to increase both anyways. Training.
It really will. Yeah. It's not like you can focus on one or the other anyway. So
yeah. It's not like you can't just, like, going back to Dylan's scenario, like, let's say you're that athlete that's 225 and 300. You're not going to just be like, all right, I'm going to increase my FTP to 350, but I'm going to keep my LT2 or LT1 at 225. Like, they're going to adjust simultaneously. But there are things you can do to train specifically to, I'm trying to think of a way that you could train them to, increase that gap, but I don't think there really is. I think you're mostly just going to be training to decrease the gap between LT1 and LT2. Maybe there'd be, like, maybe if you're doing very, I don't know. I mean, what would you do to increase that gap? I'm trying to even think about what.
Yeah, it would be difficult to even find a way to increase the gap if you wanted to, and I don't think you do want to. If we're talking about changing your power duration curve, normally we're talking about changing your ability to do very short duration efforts. So like 1 minute efforts, 30-second efforts, 10-second efforts in relation to your FTP, right?
Sure.
So that's possible. You can do, you can go from doing no sprints whatsoever, you never do a sprint, to you're doing a sprint session twice a week. And now, like, your power duration curve is going to change because you're going to be better at sprinting. And relative to your FTP, your 10-second power is higher now. But if we're talking about LT1 versus LT2, I don't even know of a training protocol that you could employ that would increase the gap if you wanted to do that. And I don't think you do want to do that, but yeah. If anything, the training that you do, just proper training will decrease the gap. And I would argue that is almost always a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if Scott's training with a power meter, but based on his question, I sort of, I mean, he says without that much power increase, right? So I guess is training
Man, why would you even be
with
thinking
power.
about LT1 and LT2 if you didn't have a power meter? He's got to have a power meter
Yeah,
for
Mhm.
sure.
yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I might my question would still go back to maybe Scott just doesn't have a real good estimate of what his LT1 actually is.
Could be.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
a lot of people make this mistake, and it'll happen all the time when they're going out for endurance rides. And I see with athletes that I coach too, where you can ride pretty well above your LT1, and it still feels like an easy effort relative to doing
comfortable,
threshold
maybe.
sessions.
Yeah.
So a lot of people really do override their zone 2 or endurance rides, and they're riding above that LT1 or above what zone 2 would actually be, without even realizing it.
Yeah, if we were just looking at heart rate, the number that I always say is a good rough estimate for your LT1 is 75% of your max heart rate. That gives you 25%, like, before you're maxed out. Like, I know that, entering into like what feels unsustainable, you're probably not going to be at your max, but still that's probably not even going to happen until you're at like 90%
90.
of your max heart rate. That gives you 15. That's like a 15% difference, like just in heart rate difference. So like, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm with you in that, like, maybe he's riding, maybe what he thinks is his LT1, he's actually riding at like 85% of his
Yeah.
max heart rate, and he
Yeah,
should drop
that's
that
kind of
down.
where I'm at.
Because if you think if he's riding at 85% of his max heart rate and he thinks that's his LT1, then yeah, there is only like a 5% increase before he hits threshold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's too small. Yeah. For like an LT1 ride or whatever, endurance ride.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else to add?
Nah.
All right.
That's good.
Sweet. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next week.
Sweet. See ya.